Yeah, not enough this week. Right. Okay. So last week we were discussing the sources of Rashi, and we spoke about Unklus. Right? And we spoke about number 2, page number 2. No.
I'm looking with from last week.
From last week's, yeah, but I need number 2 also.
Here's the number 2.
Okay.
Here's the number 2.
They were supposed to give, I asked them to print number 2 and number 3. So I can use my phone, you share, guys.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Good, no, because this is important. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, okay. We're going to learn a pasuk in the Torah. I'm starting from line number 100. Line number 100 on page number 2. Okay, if somebody can share, that will be great, because a lot of people haven't even got pages here. Okay. Right. Okay, the Torah tells us the story of the guy who goes in the middle of the night to somebody else's house to steal, and story of Machteret. And the Torah comes and tells us the following. Im b'machteret yimatzeh haganav v'uka umet ein lo damim. Somebody comes in the middle of the night to your house and you don't know who it is and you feel threatened, then there's a special halacha that you can kill the guy. Im zarcha alav hashemesh, if it's clear to you that it's somebody who won't kill, then damim lo, then what happens is it's considered murder. Shalem yishalem imein lo nimkar b'gneivato. And if the ganav is found, obviously he's got to pay the money back. Now, there's a very interesting machloket between Rashi and Unklus. Rashi explains in line number 103, Im zarcha alav hashemesh. Ein ze ela kamin mashal. This is a parable. Im barur lecha hadavar sheyesh lo shalom imcha. If you know this guy is going to live with you in peace, keshemesh hazeh, like this sun, shehu shalom ba'olam, kach pashut lecha sheino ba laharog. You're 100% sure this guy is not going to kill. Afilu yamod ba'amon negdo, even if you stand up against him, he won't kill. Kagon, av, a father, hachoter lignov mamon haben. Father's going to steal from his son. Then the Torah says, it's clear that what? The father is not going to kill you. B'yadua sherachmei ha'av al haben, ve'eno ba'al iskei nefashot. Now, that's the way Rashi explains. Damim lo k'chayhu, it's considered as if he's living. V'retzichahi. Shalem yishalem haganav mamon sheganav, and the thief will pay. Ve'eno chayav mita. Now, v'unklus shetirgem im einai desadi nafla alayhu. Completely different translation. Lakach lo shita acheret. Unklus explained the pasuk in a completely different way. Rashi takes note of every single translation of Unklus. There will be times when Rashi accepts Unklus, and there will be times where Rashi argues with Unklus. And Rashi comes along with his Sheilot Utshuvot, and he says the following in 910. Kva avu 20 shana. I've already been learning Torah for over 20 years. She'eni mefarsham k'targumo shel Unklus. I don't always explain the text according to Unklus. Rashi is completely independent. Why? Because his objective is to explain the psukim the way he sees them. The way he sees them. And it's very, very important that when we learn Chumash Rashi, we take note of these things. When Rashi quotes Onkelos, when he argues with him, and you'll find many, many sentences where Rashi argues with Onkelos. Now, yes.
So when he argues with him, does he provide a source?
Always. He will always explain why he doesn't accept Onkelos. He'll bring psukim in the whole of the Tanakh to prove why he's of the opinion not like Onkelos. Okay? And Rashi works very, very hard to explain words. Next, guys. So Rashi has in his library Onkelos. He has Tamei Mikra. What else does he have?
Art scroll.
Does he have Yonatan? He does not have him. Rashi did not have Targum Yonatan ben Uziel. He had Targum Yonatan ben Uziel on the Nach, not on Torah. Next. Pardon? Because he never quotes him. And there's no Onkelos on Nach. So when Rashi quotes Targumo, then we know it's Yonatan ben Uziel. Now, next. Sorry? 1 minute, we'll get to Midrashim. We'll get to Midrashim soon. Okay? Obviously he had Midrashim and he had the Midrashei Chazal. But we're going to go into that specifically in a minute. Now, what does he have from the period of the Gemara until when he lived? Now, if you will, we spoke about the period of the Gaonim, Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon. Did he have the writings of the Gaonim? He only once in the whole of his commentary on the Torah, he quotes Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon. Only once. Because Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon wrote his commentary on Tanakh in Arabic. That means anybody who opens up Torah Chaim will see they bring the explanations of Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, but that is a translation from Arabic. Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, as we spoke before, wrote very few books in Hebrew. And one of them was a book called the Azharot. The Azharot, Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, what he does is the following. On every one of the Aseret Hadibrot, we spoke about it when we learnt about Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, he goes through all the 613 mitzvot. And he shows how each of the Aseret of the 613 mitzvot can fit into the 10 commandments. Now, the Rashi, I forgot to take this Chumash. The Rashi appears in Sefer Shmot. And Rashi quotes Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, and this is the only time he quotes him in the whole of his commentary on the Torah. It's on the pasuk, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says in Perek Chaf Daled, pasuk Yud Bet, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe alei elai ahara. Come up to me on the mountain, ve'yesham. Ve'etna lecha, and I'm going to give you, et luchot ha'even, the tablets of stone, va'atorah va'amitzvah, and the Torah and the mitzvah asher katavti lehorotam. Comes along Rabbeinu Rashi and says, what is Torah v'hamitzvah? Very complicated sentence, which we're not going to go into now, but Rashi comes along and says the following. Kol 613 mitzvot, because how can be, I'm going to give you the Luchot HaEven and the Torah and the mitzvah. What does the Torah and mitzvah come? What is this? And Rashi comes along and says, Kol 613 mitzvot, Bichlal Aseret HaDibrot. They're included in the Aseret HaDibrot. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give him the 10 commandments and he's going to show him what the Torah mitzvot are. V'Rabbeinu Sadia Pirish, Ba'azharot Sheyised, in the book called the Azharot, Sheyised, L'kol Dibur Uvidibur Mitzvot Hatzuliot Bahem. And this is the only time Rashi, in his whole commentary on the Chumash, quotes one of the Gaonim. Next, what else did he have? And here we come to perhaps one of those fascinating books or groups of books which he had. Now, in the 900s in Spain was the period of the great Balei Hadikduk, the people who studied Hebrew language.
Jewish people? No.
Jewish, all Jewish guys. Yes. Okay. They were in the 900s, and there were a group of people who began giving us the rules of Hebrew grammar. At the same time, unaware of each other, in Tveria, and basically in Tveria, there was the great people who dealt with the Masorah, how you punctuate the Torah, which we've already spoken about. Okay, but they are not aware of one another. They're not. Okay, there were no WhatsApps between Tveria and Spain.
Where was the third group doing WhatsApp?
What do you say?
Where was the third group doing WhatsApp?
Yeah. Okay. And Rashi, now, some of the books were written in Arabic. In Arabic. Ibn Yanach, one of the great grammarians, wrote his book in Arabic. But there was a huge difference of opinion within the great grammarians of Spain who wrote their books in Hebrew, which Rashi has. Rashi has their books, manuscripts, and he uses them to explain words in the Torah, which is very, very hard to find the sources of them. Now we're going to give examples. Okay? What are the examples? Sorry, guys. Right. Okay, we've called the Dikduk. Now, Vatered, line number 115. Vatered, Bat Paro. Rashi was perhaps one of the greatest grammarians. And he says the following. Vatered Bat Paro lirchotz al hayaor. V'na'arotea, and her maidservants, holchot al yad ha'or. Vateret ateva, and the Bat Paro sees the teva betoch hasuf, within the what do they call them? The reeds. Yeah. Vatishlach et amata, and she sends her amata. Vatikacheha. And Rashi has a big problem with this word, amata. Now, Rashi comes along and says, et amata, her maidservant, from the word ama ha'ivriya, maidservants. V'rabotenu darshu lashon yad. But the rabbis, Chazal explained it, she stretched a hand out. Now, what is the true explanation of the word? Comes along Rashi and says the following. אבל לפי דקדוק לשון הקודש, היה לו להינקד amata mem dgusha. Now, if it's, Rashi comes along and says the word, it should have been, if you explain it, the word amata from the word yad, then Rashi comes along, there should have been a dagesh in the mem. V'heim darshu et amata et yada. And they explained it differently. Now Rashi think to yourselves, what does he have here? He already has a Tanakh, which has got Nikud. Who were the ones who punctuated and gave Nikud to the words of the Torah? Not Chazal. Chazal didn't do that. Who were the ones who did it? The Masoretes, the ones who comes from Tveria. Yes. Okay? When HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictates the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, how does he dictate it? Does he tell him where there's nukudot, where they're not nukudot, etc., etc.? Obviously he does, because he tells him how to read the word. And here's the problem. What is the translation of the word amata? Maidservant or hand? If you do not have punctuation, then both are correct. The minute you begin to punctuate the word, you have a problem. Yes.
It begs the question, how did our ancestors figure which is the right letter, which is the right punctuation, if they weren't there at the time of the giving?
Well, obviously it was handed down from teacher to pupil, parents to children. But then you have to make a sign in the word how you're going to read it. Now just think to yourself, I'm not an English expert, I don't know anything, okay? Okay, don't know nothing. Ain't know nothing, as the English will say. But in English, you have vowels within the words.
Right, correct.
That's what I was taught in grade 1.
Right.
Right? Hebrew, you don't have that. What? Adayom hazeh. Okay? In what? In Hebrew, you don't have that. And therefore, you can read multiple ways of reading.
So what does the trop change?
What?
The trop.
They will also change. We spoke about that last week.
Correct.
Okay? But here we're talking about grammar.
It's good for drasha.
What do you say?
It's good for drasha.
Exactly, 100%. Shivim panim la Torah. The minute you don't have punctuations, you don't have tameh mikra, then you have multiple explanations. But Rashi here has this problem. Okay, I see the way the Baalei Mesorah showed there's a dagesh in the mem. It doesn't fit in with one of the explanations. Yeah.
How does he take care of a kriva katar situation?
That's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That you can't get away from, because that is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. When there's a kriying ksiv, that's completely different. Okay, because that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told you to write it in a certain way, and you read it in a certain way. Here, that's not the problem. The problem is the explanation of the word.
Not to get political, but it would be interesting, and it would be interesting to see how, and I'll tell you why. How the Lubavitcher Rebbe explains this. The reason is because the Lubavitcher Rebbe has a whole parish.
Yeah, I know.
Why every statement of Rashi.
Not every statement, but this one he didn't have.
Yeah, he did not.
No. When it comes to grammar, because he deals with it.
Save me from looking back.
No. As far as I remember, he doesn't. Obviously, there will be Hasidic interpretations for this concept, but it doesn't begin with Hasidus. It begins with the text.
Correct.
And that's what I'm dealing with, the text. Let's go to the next explanation. Okay? And that's that we always have to be careful. We often run to Botim when we don't deal with the words themselves. Let's go to the next one. Line number 125. V'yirkasu et hachoshen. What does v'yirkasu mean? They will zip up. Rochsan in modern Hebrew is a zip. Okay? You will join the choshen mitabotav el tabot ha'ifod b'ptil techelet yot al cheshev ha'ifod v'lo yizach hachoshen me'al ha'ifod. And Rashi has this massive problem. What does the word yizach mean? Now, Rashi cannot find a parallel for this word in the whole of the Tanakh. And Rashi comes along and says, sorry, okay, you'll have to excuse me because this is complicated. Lashon nituk. It is a language of you cannot disconnect. You're not allowed to disconnect the choshen from the ephod. Velashon aravihu. It comes from a Semitic language. Kedivrei Dunash ben Labrat. Dunash ben Labrat, anybody knows Dror Yikra? He wrote it. If you look in Dror Yikra, the first letters are his name, Dunash. And he was one of the greatest grammarians in Spain. Okay? And what he does was, he translates words. And he tries to connect up what the word Yizach means. Now, it's a very strange word. Yud Zayin Chet. Where do you have words Yud Zayin Chet? And Rashi Dunash said, it stems, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, uses, it's not a normal Hebrew word. Now, this opens up a Pandora's box. What do you mean? What?
The world was created in Hebrew.
Oh, the world was created in Hebrew, etc., etc., and you get stuck on all these things. Okay? Exactly, the Totafot, 100%. And there Rabbi Akiva himself says that. Let's go to the next explanation. Now, Shuva Vayhi bin Soharon, everybody knows it. Vayhi bin Soharon Vayome Moshe, Kuma Hashem v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu mesanecha mipanecha. What does it mean? Uvnucho yomar, Shuva Hashem rivavot alfei Yisrael. Now, what does Shuva Hashem mean here? Return. What is it?
Return of Hashem or return
What?
To, return of Hashem or return to Hashem?
Yeah, but Rashi doesn't explain it that way. Look at Rashi. Rashi comes along and says, Menachem. Menachem ben Sruk. Also the great grammarian who nearly argued with Dunash in every single thing. So Rashi has these two books in front of him. When he writes the Perush on the Torah, he uses the books of the great Spanish grammarians who wrote in Hebrew. And Menachem explains Targumo Lashon Margoa, a shlof, rest. V'chein b'shuva v'nachat tivashun. Let's look in the pasuk in Sefer Yeshayahu. Now remember, Yizach, Rashi doesn't find one pasuk in the whole of the Nach to explain the word Yizach. Here, in the case of Shuva Hashem, the way the Menachem explained it, he does. B'shuva v'nachat tivashun. Ko amar Hashem Elokim Kadosh Yisrael. B'shuva v'nachat tivashun. B'ashket uvitcha tiyeh gvuratchem v'lo avitem. The translation is, for so said the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, with tranquility and restfulness shall you be saved. Now, you can't explain the word Beshuva in Yeshayahu as returning. Doesn't fit in. Because what's the next word? Nachas. Benachat. Restfulness. So therefore Rashi is forced to say that the explanation of Shuva Hashem means HaKadosh Baruch Hu will tell you to camp and you will rest. Uvnucho Yomar Shuva Hashem Rivavot Alfei Yisrael. And let's look. What? Uvnucho, when you come to rest. You've camped. Milashon Machaneh. What?
It sounds like it's related also to the some.
Exactly. And that's what he says. If you explain it, the word Shuva as returning, it doesn't fit in. And therefore Rashi is forced to say, accept the explanation of Menachem, who says Shuvah means not the usual explanation of returning, but rest, because when a person returns home, he also rests. And therefore, says the K'tava Kabbalah, one of the great commentators on the Torah, Shuvah Hashem me'inyan b'shuvah v'nachat tivashun. V'hu yotze means to say, you're going ahead. V'ta'amo yashkit v'yaniach et Israel. He will make Am Yisrael calm. You don't have to worry. Af she'em ribui gadol. V'hinei kuma b'hei. We're not going into all that. Now, let's give ourselves another example of, that is the Medaktakim. And Rashi goes ahead with all the Baalei Dikduk and he uses them. That was in his library. So we have Unklus, we have Tamei Mikra, we have the text, and we have Dikduk. And then I was asked, what about Midrashim? What about Midrashim? When does Rashi decide to bring a Medrash?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Do we know what exact text he had? Like when the Nagesh, right, in the middle of the Mem, right? So in the Leningrad Codex, for instance, does it appear there? Do we know which actual text?
We do not know what Rashi had in front of him. Okay, we don't.
Okay.
We rely on Rashi. Okay, we spoke about that last week. The first thing is he had a different version of the Torah. Okay, we spoke about that. Okay, what version did he have of the Baalei Mesorah? Okay, that is a big question also. How does he use Tamei Mikra? Because Tamei Mikra is also the Mesorah. So therefore, we don't know. We have to rely on what he says. Okay, we don't know what Tanakh he had. We don't have that manuscript. Doesn't exist. Okay, the Rambam, we know which Tanakh he had. He had the Keter. Okay, that he writes that specifically in Ilchot Sefer Torah. He has that one. Rashi, we don't know. Now let's go to Midrashei Chazal. When does Rashi bring a Midrash? And here we're going to learn a very famous Midrash which you all know. Let's read it inside. Sorry guys. Right. וידבר השם אל משה לאמור. שלח לך אנשים. Sorry, we're going to start off the parsha before חטא המרגלים. והענן שר מעל האוהל, and the cloud went away from the top of the ohel. והנה מרים מצורעת כשלג. And Miriam was white. She got leprosy. ויפן אהרון אל מרים והנה מצורעת. Now, they wait 7 days. ואחר נסו העם מחצרות, ויחנו במדבר פרן. So they travel from Chatzerot, and they go and they camp in Paran. Now, וידבר השם אל משה לאמור. Next parsha, Parshas שלח לך. שלח לך אנשים ויתור אל ארץ כנען אשר אני נותן איש אחד לאיש אחד למטה אבותיו תשלחו כל נשיא בהם. The story of the Meraglim. Now, says Rashi, למה נסמכה פרשת מרגלים לפרשת מרים? Why they joined together? לפי שלקתה על עסקי דיבה שדיברה באחיה. She spoke Lashon Hara about her brother. ורשעים הללו לא לקחו מוסר. Big deal. Okay, what do you mean, why were they joined? Because where were the Meraglim sent from? Midbar Paran. So obviously that's the next incident. And if it's the next incident, then it's chronological. So why does Rashi say, bring this midrash? What does he need it for? Why does Rashi bring this midrash? And here we have a fascinating insight into this story, which often we're not aware of. Comes along the Mizrahi, the first great commentary on Rashi. No, guys. Right, and says the following. He says, כבר פירשנו כמה פעמים, line number 161, שהסיבה שהביא רש"י בפירוש החומש המדרשות שדרכו חז"ל בסמיכות קצר פרשיות, והניח המדרשות של סמיכות שאר פרשיות. Says the Mizrahi, I don't understand. When does Rashi decide to ask the question, Lama nismecha? What were his guidelines? What were Rashi's guidelines to ask the question, why does one parsha come after another? Sometimes he decides to write it, and sometimes he leaves it out. Why does Parshat Emor come after Parshat Metzorah, Parshat Kedoshim? Rashi doesn't say anything. Why, for instance, stories of Avram Avinu, etc., etc.? What are the guidelines of Rashi when he says Lama nismecha? And here the Mizrahi comes along and tells us a huge chidush. And he says the following. Line number 164. He, מפני שרש"י אינו מביא בפירוש החומש רק אותם מדרשות שהם קרובים לפשוטו של מקרא. Rashi is not worried about droshes, votim. Rashi is worried about sequences. How does it fit into the story? כמו שכתוב בפסוק, וישמעו את קול האלוקים מתהלך בכל הגן, ולפיכך אותם פרשיות שאין מקומות סמוכות, ones which aren't connected, אז דרשו בהם למה נסמכו. Why? So he says, ואותם לפיכך, in line number 169, לפיכך צריך לומר, שרש"י סובר, שהפרשיות הללו אינם כתובות על הסדר. פרשס בעלויסך, פרשס שלח לך, פרשס קורח are not written in a chronological order. Why? says Rashi. לפיכך, אמר, למה נסמכה פרשת מרגלי פרשת מרים? היה לו לכתוב פרשת קורח תחילה, שהיה בחצרות, כדפרש רש"י גבי בחצרות ודי זהב. חצרות זה מחלוקת של קורח, ואחר כך פרשת מרגלים, שהיה במדבר פרן, כי דכתיב ואחר נסוע מחצרות, ויחנו ממדבר פרן, וכתוב וישלח אותם משה ממדבר פרן. According to Rashi, Chatzerot, what took place in Chatzerot? Two things took place in Chatzerot. The story of Miriam and the story of Korach. Oh, now Rashi's got a problem. If the story of Chatzerot, story of Korach took place in Chatzerot, what should have happened? Korach should come before Parsha Shlach Lecha. Chronological order. And that was the question of Rashi. If it is not written in the chronological order, why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictate to Moshe Rabbeinu the story of the Meraglim before the story of Korach? Right, guys, let's try to work this out. HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictates the stories of Sefer Bamidbar to Moshe Rabbeinu. Correct? He dictates it to him. And then Moshe Rabbeinu goes, so to speak, goes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says to him, "Oh God, OMG, why did you tell me to write the story of Korah, of the spies, before the story of Korah? I was there. I saw, I know, Korah takes place chronologically before the story of the Meraglim. So why are you dictating to me in this order?" That, guys, is why Rashi is forced to ask that question. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictate the story of Moshe, of the Meraglim, before he tells him to write the story of Korach? That is the depths of the question of Rashi. It's not just a vault. It's just not to tell him, Lashon Hora, Lashon here or there. No, guys, it's a lot deeper than that. Because if you learn Torah as its normal text, you will find a contradiction to this idea. That is the Chidush of Rashi here. Rashi brings a medrash when he is forced to, because of a question. Okay, so what is Lama Nismecha? Why they joined? In this question, there's a question which lies behind it. What is the question which lies behind it? Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictate the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu in a different order of incidents? Right. Okay? Does everybody understand this concept? And now we're going to learn the way Rashi sees Midrashim. Very good question. Okay? Are we forced to say, even if you say there's no chronological order, the question still begs itself, why? Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu decide to dictate the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu in a different order of historical incidents? When there's necessary, he will do it. When there's a necessity, he will do it and explain to us why. Okay? Therefore, Ein Mukdam U'Muchar b'Torah is only an answer to the question when things took place. But then behind that, there's a different question. Correct, it's not in a chronological order. But then why we've got to ask ourselves, why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictate the Torah in a wrong order? What are the reasons behind it? So Rashi comes along and tells us that it is the idea behind incidents which connects up to stories and not history.
Why did you call it the wrong order?
Pardon?
Why did you just say
the wrong historical order? It's the wrong historical order.
But it's the correct order for...
Oh, 1 minute. It's a correct, let me just think of the word.
I'm sorry for...
No. It's a correct theological order. That means there are two orders here in the Torah. There's historical order, thanks Michael. There's a historical order and a theological order, or an ethical order. And Rashi and HaKadosh Baruch Hu sometimes choose to dictate the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu in a way that the order is not historical, but it's ethical. It goes according to the subject and the story and the motto of the story, and not necessarily history.
So there's Lashon Hora also in Parshat Korah.
Pardon?
Also Parshat Korah.
Is it Lashon Hora there? Not necessarily. Is the story of Korach a Lashon Hora story, or is it a rebellion? Okay? That's a big subject. Right.
So like approximately how many times does how many times Rashi actually raises the question of some clue?
Pardon?
Is there do you have a number? How many times?
And you can go and look in the Barilan program, and you will go to say Lama Nismecha, and you will see the whole way through. Okay? I'll give you, okay, let me give you another explanation. Okay, I haven't got a Tanakh yet, but let me just check it. Okay. וידבר השם אל משה לאמור. I just went into my mind now. וידבר השם אל משה לאמור. דבר אל אהרון ואמרת אליו, בעלותך את הנרות אל מול פני המנורה יאירו שבעת הנרות. Beginning of Parshas Va'aloischo. Yeah? When you will lift up. Comes along Rashi and says, למה נסמכה פרשס מנורה לפרשס נשיאים? Why is Parshas, the previous Parsha of the end of Nosor gives the whole 12 tribes, 12 Nesiim, what they bring the Korbanot? Why does it bring Aaron here? Rashi has a problem. Because Ba'alat Chait HaNeirot takes place when? Before the Nesiim brought their Korban. Right? Vayhi Bayom HaShmini. Okay? When does Aaron HaKohen light the menorah? Okay? It's a huge sugi in the Gemara. But Rashi comes along and asks us, but why does the Torah connect the two stories together? What is the ethical? We don't need it. Why? Because we're talking about the Nesiim. Why bring the menorah? And Rashi's got an explanation. It doesn't make any difference what the answer is. What is the question? The question is, the subject matter didn't fit in. Why? Let me give you an example. How many times is the story of the menorah mentioned in the Torah? Any ideas? 3. 3 times. Parshas Truma. Parshas, which is the making of the menorah. Parshas Tetzaveh. Sorry, it's 4 times. Parshas Tetzaveh. V'atat Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael to bring the Shemen Zaytzach. The end of this week's Parsha. Okay? Correct? The end of this week's Parsha. What's the end of this week's Parsha, guys? The end of this week's Parsha is... Let me read it to you. I don't need to... The Torah comes and tells us, Saveh b'nei Yisrael v'ikchu elecha shemen zayit zach, katzit lama'ol alon nei tamid, v'yaroch oto Aaron me'erev ad boker. And the 4th time is Parshas Va'aloischo. Rebbeinu Shalom, what do you need it 4 times for? Put them all together. So I understand the building of the Mishkan. I understand the usage of the Mishkan. But here already it's talking about after the Mishkan is built in our Parsha. Saveh b'nei Yisrael v'ikchu elecha shemen zayit zach. What should it be next? Ba'alotcha et hanerot. No, it doesn't say Ba'alot Chanerot, Sefer Vayikra. It says it in Sefer Bamidbar after Parshat Nasim. And this is the question of Rashi. I don't understand. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictate Ba'alot Chanerot after Parshat Nasim? So therefore the 2 questions. Historical sequences and when HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictates to Moshe Rabbeinu when to write it. And that's where Rashi uses Midrashei Chazal. Any questions? Guys, I know I'm frightening you a bit, but you have to look in the Torah with your eyes wide open. Yes?
If correctly what you said, Aaron is commanded to light the menorah in between the Nesiim bringing their stuff.
No, it says, I just read it to you. In Parshas Vayikra. Look in Parshas Emor, the end of this week's Parsha. What's written there? It says the following. Sorry. ויקחו אליך שמן זית זך, מחוץ לפרוכת העדות בו אל עמוד, יערוך אותו אהרון מערב עד בוקר, על המנורה הטהורה, and then he should have said, בעלו ישחי סנרוס. Why doesn't it say in Sefer Vayikra?
So the Nesiim have all brought their korbanot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Then I misunderstood you.
Yeah, the Nesiim have all their korbanot. You're talking about the 12th day, but Moshe Rabbeinu, the first day of the Mishkan, Aaron does it. So why write it then? after you finish Yud Bet Nisan.
Didn't Aaron have a problem because he only
Yes, your answer already. Don't worry about answers. First of all, text. Don't look at answers. What does the text say?
but we know that Torah was not necessarily written in sequence.
Pardon?
I think
That is the question which Rashi asks. Why does the Torah not write it in historical sequence? Lama nismecha.
because it's not a historical book.
You can give all the answers in the world, but Rashi is first of all looking at the text as a text. Don't look for answers. First of all, look at the questions. Why is it written in that way? What is the purpose? And that's when Rashi writes, Lama nismecha. It's got nothing to do with droshus. First of all, it doesn't fit in. It doesn't fit in. And that's the question which Rashi asks. When you read a book, you want to know chapter after chapter. And when you think of it as historical sequence. And Rashi said, it doesn't work out. That's the question that's when he brings Midrashei Chazal. When he brings Midrashei Chazal, not as Musa, but looking at the text which doesn't fit in. That's why he brings it. He's not worried about all different ideas. He's worried about the text of the Torah. Yeah.
Just to back up a little bit, before you were asking which version of the Tanakh of the Chumash did Rashi look at, and the question is, what are the differences between the different codexes? Is it? I mean, none of them have Nekudot in them. None of them have the Tameh and the Ra. So what?
No, they did have. That was obviously you've got a Sefer Torah. The Balei HaMesorah put into the Torah Nikud and Tamei Mikra. Okay?
So the different, like the Codex Sassono, those
Exactly.
in there.
Yeah.
So that's the differences.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's carry on. Let's give ourselves another insight. Okay? Let's carry on another insight. Daber Parshas Kedoshim. Another medrash of Chazal. וידבר השם אל משה לאמור. דבר אל בני ישראל, ואמרת להם, קדושים תהיו, כי קדוש אני השם אלוקיכם. Rashi comes along and says to us, מלמד, שנאמרה פרשה זו בהקהל. This parsha was said in Hakel, מפני שרוב גופי תורה תלויים בה. Because in Parshas Kedoshim, there are many laws which are foundations to the Jewish religion. Now, what's Rashi's problem here? Why does he bring this in? Now, what have we got to say? Let's look in Parshat Bo. Daber el kol adat Yisrael emor, בעשור לחודש הזה. תיקחו ויקחו להם איש סלע ועץ אבות, סלע בית. Both of them say כל עדת ישראל, כל עדת בני ישראל. But Korban Pesach was said in Hakel. That means, when does Rashi choose to write this? Okay. Let's give ourselves an example. V'im tomar, kol haTorah kola, says the Siftei Chachamim, kol haTorah kula, shana Moshe liYisrael, כמו שפירש רש"י בפרשת כי תישא. The whole of the Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Bnei Yisrael. Correct? So why does he say that here? What do you mean? I don't understand. What's Rashi worried about here? What worries him in this parsha? The whole of the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu explains. ויש לומר, בפרשה זו נאמרה להם בהקהל נשים וטף, תכתיב כל עדת בני ישראל. כי לכתיב בפרשת וילך, הקהל את העם והאנשים והטף, אבל שאר פרשיות משה לא שנה אלא לאנשים. The whole of the Torah is said to whom? Men, people who can understand. People can understand. No, also women could understand, but I'm saying the people who can understand. It's not for little kids. sometimes you want to create an environment. Hakel is not there for teaching. Hakel is there for the environment. Okay? That is what it is. It's a concert. Hakel is a concert. It is not a teaching process. And sometimes to create the environment, you choose what is important to uplift the environment. Let's go next stage. עוד יש לומר, ומשה שנה להם כיתות כיתות, זו אחר זו. אבל פרשה זו היה במעמד כל ישראל. Okay? What's Rashi trying to teach us is that this Kol Adat Yisrael, the same way as in Korban Pesach, it has to be taught to everybody in one go. Because when does HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell Moshe Rabbeinu to speak to all Bnei Yisrael? When I want to create an atmosphere. An atmosphere. The concept of Parshas Kedoshim and the concept of Parshas Yitzias Mitzrayim is not detail orientated, but it is atmosphere orientated. And that's what Rashi feels that what? That here there's something strange in the Parsha of Kedoshim. It is the strangeness. It is the problems which, why does the Torah say in these words, Daber el kol adam Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him to speak to everybody. What? V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta ba'am v'talmud Torah, etc., etc. No. Because here, it's atmosphere orientated. And that was the problem which faced Rashi. When does HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell Moshe Rabbeinu to speak to everybody? And when doesn't he? Now, these are insights when we learn Rashi. Now, we've just started. Because next week, in the next year, we're going to go into what is, and that's page number 3. Okay? Did Rashi, besides the objective of understanding text, did he want to give us any general outlook on the Torah?
General what?
Outlook. Did he have any objectives besides Pshuto Shel Mikro? And that will be our share on Rashi on the Torah. Guys, we haven't discussed yet Rashi on Shas, Rashi on Nach.
Are we going to?
Next year, if you want to, unless we move over to the Rambam. Okay, but that you've got to choose, guys, not me. I don't mind anything. Everything is a challenge for me. Okay, but I'm saying, guys, when you learn Rashi, okay, and we all try to look at Rashi sometimes, you always have to ask yourself a question. Why does Rashi say something here and not something there? Why does he bring this statement? Why doesn't he bring another statement? What's going on in his mind? Now, I'm going to tell you. Anybody learn in Hasmonean school? Yeah, oh, Paul, yeah. There was a very great teacher there. Okay, he gave me early morning shir, Rabbi Knoblovich. Yeah.
I was his last bar mitzvah.
Oh, you were his last bar mitzvah. Okay, I happened to learn with him 3 years in Hasmonean. Early morning shir. Okay, now, I'll never forget this. And he used to say to us, guys, when you learn Rashi, think to yourself, he didn't have a biro. He didn't have a pen. He didn't have paper. He didn't have exercise books. Now, think to yourself, and this is what he used to tell us when I was 12 years old, 13 years old. He used to say to us, when you think of Rashi, just think to yourself what it needed for him to get paper. Okay? He didn't buy it in the shop. Okay? Parchment, ink, and everything. And that is why it was so hard. Rashi is so concise. Rashi is concise because he created for himself projects. His first project was to explain Torah Shebechsav. His next project was Nevi'im Ksuvim. His next project was the whole of Shas. Okay? When you think in those lines, Rashi, Rambam, Mishnah Torah, Moreh Nevuchim, Perush HaMishnayos, you begin to think to yourself, guys, they didn't waste their time seeing football matches. I'll see you in a few weeks' time.
Sure.
The Rebbetzin taught us Rashi. She was just
Yeah.
say, alone come Rashi to explain it.
Okay.